My name is Millie, and I am the membership manager here at the National Flute Association. The NFA was founded in 1972 as a common ground for flutists to exchange ideas and inspiration. In the years since, it has grown to be one of the world's largest flute organizations with members from all 50 states and countries across the globe. We invite all of you to become NFA members if you haven't already and to take advantage of our year-round benefits, including subscription to the Flutist Quarterly, borrowing privileges from our sheet music library, discounted instrument insurance, and more. Visit nfaonline.org to learn more and join today. Of course, if you have any questions, you can email me directly. We acknowledge today that tonight's online event was made by the NFA Endowment and sponsored and supported by the IDEA Equity and Inclusion Committee. So I would like to introduce Jenny O'Brown, who will introduce our speaker for this evening.
Thank you so much, Millie. It's great to see everyone. Hope you all are enjoying some sunshine in your respective areas. Today, we finally have a nice day here in Chicago, so we're all very, very happy. I am so thrilled to introduce to you Kevin Kwan Loucks. Kevin and I work together on the board of Chamber Music America, where I have always really enjoyed my time serving on the executive committee and as program chair and in a number of different roles. And Kevin comes to us. He is the CEO and president of Chamber Music America. He is also the co-founder and faculty of the pre-college division of Chamber Music OC as well. And he's been just an incredible leader of CMA and has seen several areas of growth and visioning for the future that I'm sure he'll speak about. Chamber Music America is an organization that has really been at the forefront of DEI initiatives for decades and has really championed the work of musicians who were oftentimes systemically marginalized and has really redefined how we look at chamber music and how inclusive that we can be in chamber music as well. And I think it's proven to be such a great leader and role model for other organizations too. And two of the other speakers on the series are, of course, Loki Karuna and Vanessa Rose, who are also dear friends of CMA and have both been people that I've had the pleasure of working with as well. And so I think that this entire series is so inspired and so wonderful. And it is really, truly just a privilege for me to be able to serve on the DEI committee of the NFA and to work among people who are so incredibly visionary and thoughtful and are putting together great events like this one. So I'll pass it on to Kevin, who has some just great thoughts to share for this evening.
Thank you so much. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're zooming in from. Yeah, it's great to be here. I so appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I'm very humbled and honored to be able to engage really in important conversations around inclusion and diversity, equity, and accessibility. A little more about me. In addition to my executive work at CMA, I'm also a practicing artist. I'm a classically trained pianist. I'm a member of the ensemble Trio Celeste. I regularly give master classes and seminars on subjects around business development and strategic planning and entrepreneurship. And I'm happy to say that really my love of music really blossomed in high school. I was unfortunately not a wind player. Don't hold it against me. I was rather a lowly trombonist. But I actually enjoyed my time, playing Percy Grainger, like in wind ensemble and Maria Schneider arrangements in jazz band. And I would say in high school, a highlight for me was really playing piano in chamber music settings with friends. And the Bach flute sonatas were some of the very first duos I ever heard or even played. I remember how unique the experience was to have to really listen and to respond and to make those little discoveries, right, on the road to becoming a more effective collaborator. As Jenny said, I joined Chamber Music America in September 2021 as CEO, and I've been really, really privileged to lead an organization that's dedicated to advancing the small ensemble field. Our mission at CMA is centered on fostering a vibrant and inclusive chamber music community through advocacy, through support, and collaboration. CMA defines chamber music as music for small ensembles with one musician per part, generally without a conductor. Rooted in the conviction that music professionals thrive through collaboration, CMA has cultivated a diverse membership that spans genres and styles and traditions, all united by the profound cultural value and unique power of music making in the small ensemble context. CMA's work is really predicated on the belief that these genres have more in common than they differ, and that each represents an equally valuable contribution to American culture. Since its founding in CMA 1977, so just a few years away from the NFA, we've worked to foster a really vibrant community, launching initiatives that have led to the creation of hundreds of new works and supported ensembles across many generations. These initiatives include financial support for artists through grant making, community building services, annual convenings like our national conference, professional development resources, and publications also that amplify the stories of our national constituency. So something that I'm really truly proud of is the way that CMA embodies inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. I would say that at the core, we believe that these values are the cornerstone of a vibrant and thriving chamber music landscape. It's about recognizing and celebrating the richness of our differences while ensuring equitable opportunities for all artists and organizations and audiences, just everyone. It's the essence of what makes music and chamber music so vibrant and so compelling and really profoundly human. So for me to effectively foster these values in our everyday work, we really had to start by understanding what these concepts meant and how they connect with one another. Inclusion is about creating environments where everyone feels valued and respected and heard. Diversity encompasses the myriad of identities and backgrounds and experiences that make each of us unique. Equity involves dismantling barriers and providing fair access to resources and opportunities. And accessibility is about ensuring that physical, cognitive, and socioeconomic barriers do not prevent anyone from participating in and engaging with the arts, and in our case, specifically chamber music. So I would like to examine IDEA frameworks through three separate contexts that represent some of the CMA's most important interests. The first would be how outreach for our grant programs led to the building of a healthier national community. The second would be how our commitment and belief that diversity at both the staff and the board levels lead to better outcomes. And lastly, an example of programmatic work that we're engaged in to better connect with our local community here in New York. So at CMA, we've made it our mission to translate these values and ideals into tangible action. And one area where that has been particularly successful has been through our grant programs. Last year, we distributed over $1.3 million to the field, supporting commissions, artistic projects, and creative initiatives throughout the country. We're so proud to share that of the 64 total funded projects in 2023, 48% went to Alana grantees, African, Latinx, Asian, Arab, and Native American. Now, we knew that if we wanted to be truly equitable in the distribution of funding from our foundation partners like Duke, Gilman, Mellon, and New York Community Trust, we would need to be really intentional with our outreach to various communities that may not have seen themselves as part of CMA. One of my colleagues from the grants department is actually on this call right now. And I can say with absolute confidence that she is one of the reasons that this work has been prioritized and why it's been so successful. So in 2021, my colleague, Susan Dadian, utilized a really impressive set of resources to invite potential applicants to be part of our story. Through her targeted individual outreach efforts, she went to the composersite.com, American Composers Forum, africlassical.com, International Association of Women Composers, Native Arts and Culture, the Composer Equity Project, which is a database of over 500 women, gender nonconforming and Alana composers. And she actually conducted outreach to over 400 composers through their personal websites. The list really goes on, and it is so impressive. Emails, phone calls, invitations to serve on our grant panels. All of these efforts were really embraced and led to a new normal at CMA. I can say again with confidence, my colleague is one of the longest serving members of the team. She's an administrative lead for our new DEI task force. led by CMA's board president, Jennifer Grimm. And I would just say that I think one of the most powerful things about that initiative was the pivot in focus. It was a pivot away from the grant awards themselves and towards something that I think is maybe more important, which was an invitation. We were inviting people to join CMA. We were inviting them to see themselves as part of our community. You know, we were asking people to share their artistry with us. We wanted to introduce them, of course, to the benefits that come with being part of a supportive national community. And that's how we felt like we could be most collaborative. That's how we felt like we could build trust. And it was really, really successful. And through our grant programs, we've witnessed firsthand the transformative impact of supporting diverse voices in chamber music. You know, from emerging ensembles, breaking new ground, to established artists pushing the boundaries of tradition, each grant recipient brings a perspective and a newness in their approach to the art form. Now, I wanted to just mention this. I suspect a lot of people on this Zoom call wear a lot of different hats, right? A lot of practicing artists. I'm sure there's some educators and teachers in the room, administrators, and also I think on a personal level, parents, friends, family members, caretakers. You know, when we begin to think about practices and what we want to be present in our everyday work and lives, it can sometimes feel intimidating. I recently heard this great quote from a graphic novel called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. A boy and a horse are in the woods, and the boy says to the horse, I can't see a way through. And the horse says, well, can you see your next step? And the boy says, yeah. And then the horse replies, then just take that, right? It's so powerful. I mean, zeroing in on big goals can always feel overwhelming, when all we really need to do is to be willing to take that step forward, that first step. It was, I think, a really good reminder to me that taking what may feel like a small step can really hold enormous power, right? That mindset is something I've been thinking about lately, because I feel like we're trying to put that practice into play at Chamber Music America. And when you think about the contributions of that one individual on my grants team, and then the enormous influence that that work had on the field because of that, I think it's a great reminder that our actions and our mindset hold incredible potential. We just need courage, right, to take that step forward. So something that is also really special about being in a role like this is the sheer volume of people you get to meet, the stories you get to hear, the ways in which the organization has positively affected people. I mean, it's an incredible privilege. And if there's one observation I think I'd like to share with all of you, it's that we are so much more similar than we are different, right? We hope and we dream for so many things that are strikingly similar to one another. And particularly after the pandemic, I think we all observed a longing for connection that was really taken away from us. And I think a lot about those threads, you know, those things that bring us together. And it makes me really grateful for the people that I have in my life, you know, both personally and professionally. And the people I get to work with on a daily basis at CMA, to me, they are the best people, you know, by far. And I think reflecting diversity in our organizational leadership is essential for cultivating a culture of inclusivity and belonging. By recruiting diverse staff and board members, we're not only, you know, we not only enrich our perspectives, but also set an example for the broader field and other industries. And I think the advantages of diverse perspectives in decision-making processes can't be overstated, right? When we bring together individuals from different backgrounds and lived experiences, we do open ourselves up to new ideas, to new perspectives, and solutions to the challenges that we're all facing. And again, a lot of these challenges that we face feel universal at this point, at least to me. I'm happy to share currently at CMA, 56% of our staff identify as Alana, as well as 69% of our board. That's really impressive. You know, it's something that we're really proud of. It's something that we uplift constantly and that we're really focused on. I wanted to share just some of the criteria that we use when considering board candidates. It's pretty simple, but we hold to it. You know, we hold ourselves accountable to these things. First and foremost, leadership in the chamber music and small ensemble field. That's the first one. The second is a goal for at least 50% of our board to be Alana. And again, we're currently at 69%. Gender equity is important to us. That's the third. Fourth is diversity of roles and genre, like performers and presenters, educators, different traditions like classical and jazz, geographic location, and knowledge of and appreciation for CMA. That's all, right? And I just worked with our board committee recently to identify new board members, and those are the things we really focus on when we're making our decisions about, who will join our governance. We also consider these factors when hiring for the organization, right? We've conducted specific outreach efforts to find the right kind of candidate for our needs at times, and we've also utilized hiring firms that specialize in culture first executive placement, like HC Smith Limited. And the results have been really overwhelmingly positive for us. I just want to share also, like on the personnel level, like on the human level, another opportunity that presents itself when you have a lot of different perspectives in a space is an opportunity to recognize your own biases, right? Learning to listen to different perspectives and backgrounds and stakeholders, it's really, really important. Practice the self-reflection needed to kind of question your own reactions to things, especially if you kind of have a gut reaction of immediately disagreeing or not aligning with what something that was just shared. You want to ensure that it's not a gap in communication or a misalignment because of bias, right? And I think recognizing our own biases through self-reflection and open communication really enables us to be more inclusive. So I think, again, understanding differences and developing open, transparent, and healthy communication habits for ourselves and for our teams, it really strengthens all of our decision making. I wanted to pause here for a moment and just see if there were any questions or comments or insights or thoughts or things that people wanted to share about their own experiences, because we're all on this journey in different places. We're all learning ourselves, but we have so much to learn from one another. And I was just curious if anyone had anything that they wanted to share. Okay. Michael.
Hello. It's nice to see you again since CMA. So when looking for new board of directors, I mean, right now the board that I serve on, I feel like is a lot of people with the same biases and the same opinions and perspectives. And it seems quite difficult to locate new board members, especially based on the location where we are. And our meetings are very much like in person. None of our board members are only remote. So do you have any tips on how to scope out some people?
That's such a great question. I have to say, my predecessor, Margaret Leoy, did such a great job helping to construct the board. And so I feel very lucky that I could just step into a situation where so many of these practices already exist. But I've been in situations where boards and the board makeup, they don't feel diverse in thought or in approach, or even kind of in the industries that people represent in those groups, and it can be challenging. But I think that the first thing is maybe taking that first step, having a conversation with someone on the board chair, saying, "Hey, this is something that I'd really love to explore. It's something I'm passionate about. It's something that I believe in," right? When we have different perspectives, when we see the world in different ways, we can solve problems in different ways. We can come to solutions in a more unique way. I think that's the most dynamic thing about having diversity built into your group, your network, the people that surround you and inspire you. And so I would encourage you, because you've named it, you've already shown the courage to be able to say, this is something that I think we can do better with, right? This is something that I feel like I want to contribute to, maybe. And I think having a conversation with leadership on that board in particular could be really valuable. That's something that I always go to Jenny or some of our executive committee members when I'm not sure about something, or when I see something, or I want to try something. And what's nice about boards is they want the best for the organization. And I think that it's interesting. It's a challenge, right? Trying to convince people why certain things may be good for an organization. But I think having diverse perspectives is always going to be seen as a positive, because I don't know if you want everyone that kind of see the world in the same exact way. It's nice to have people looking at it in different ways, because that's when we can learn from each other. And that's ultimately, I think, the most inspiring space. That's what I would try. But that's a congratulations on your board service. And I think it's really important that you're doing that now.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. Thanks.
Great. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. So, we discussed a little bit how IDEA supported CMA's grant-making models, right? And also how it's enhanced CMA's hiring and recruitment practices. So I think of it kind of like the infrastructure level through grants, supporting infrastructure, and the human level. I'd also like to focus on the program level, because I think these are three very distinct tracks. And because everyone here probably wears different hats, it's interesting to kind of see how this work can be injected into different models, into different contexts and such. I would say that one of CMA's most exciting transformations is actually taking place right now. Throughout our entire industry, there really seems to be a need to adhere to a new model of continuous engagement, right? We need to commit to being sustainable and more accessible. I believe that's really the only way forward. And that organizations that are built to succeed are thinking about those values. And after a lot of rigorous analysis and kind of surveying the field and landscape in general, particularly in the New York area, it's been determined that one way for CMA to become more sustainable and truly accessible is by reimagining ourselves in a new physical space in New York City. What you see behind me is a virtual background of our office. We face Koreatown on 32nd Street. Awesome neighborhood, especially if you like Korean food, bubble tea, karaoke, it's fun. But I would argue that as a performing arts organization, as a hub for chamber music, I don't think we do a great job of serving Koreatown. And I don't think Koreatown does anything for us either. We're just kind of there, right? And our team works remotely. So we're imagining a new physical space in New York that is a real hub for performances, for recording projects, rehearsals, our national conference, which currently takes place in a hotel, panel discussions, convenings, educational programming, and also creative engagement. So this is really our new vision for a new CMA, one that's really invested in a physical community, offering something to that community that's relevant and authentic. And although we haven't yet identified a new space, we're actively dreaming, about the programming that can exist there, about what we can do in that community. And this really inspired us to begin engaging community partners to cultivate new relationships and to also test programming models, particularly around creative engagement. So Casita Maria is a Bronx-based organization that serves youth through the arts. We connected with this amazing team to offer a 6-week sound curriculum designed for 5th and 6th graders, celebrating the diverse aspects of chamber music crafted by contemporary composers of color. So students in this program are developing their own mini compositions that reflect the concepts explored in the curriculum. And they're actually presenting all of these pieces at a final sharing session in April. And the curriculum is being led by 2 of our grantees who have actually been trained as teaching artists by Sounds That Carry, which is a consultancy firm that helps build and execute education frameworks. So our intention here was to introduce some of these learning curriculums to various New York communities in hopes of creating a new baseline for educational programming at CMA. And we ultimately also want to learn more about the stakeholders that we want to serve longer term. So in creative engagement, models can and will be a foundational element of our new physical space so that we're not just being in a community, but we're contributing to it. We want to make our work essential in that community. And these models don't have to live only in New York, right? Members can work with our education specialists via online training, and through CMA partnering organizations like Presenters, they can deploy the work in communities across the country. So that's kind of our aspiration for a project like this. And again, the idea is that these students in this program, they begin to see themselves as composers that connect to the music that they're actually creating and making. I think that kind of empowerment and agency is missing, when music education is taken out of school programming. Again, I fell in love with music playing band, playing that repertoire and playing with my friends. And those programs are gone, in my hometown. So seeing that is it's really hard. But we view this work as critical in the ways that it can uplift music and musicians and composers And most importantly, I think the kids, and we're intentionally avoiding the canon of, standard repertoire, and we're opting, for the music of Kareem Alzan and Rhiannon Giddens, not because the canon isn't amazing and great, because there's so much great music that's waiting to be heard and played, that's waiting to inspire. It also honors the fact that I think young people connect to so many different things these days, right? So why not offer a plethora in an attempt to demonstrate that, yes, there's something here for you, right? That we want you to be part of our community, that you deserve it, that this is your music, right? So this project is just an example of programmatically how we are injecting these ideals and these values around IDEA into the work itself. And some of our partners have commented that it's a great equity program. It's and they've used those words to describe it, but we really don't use those words to describe it. We just see it as creative engagement. We see ourselves as being in a community, doing really important work, using teachers that we are training through our grantee cohort, and funding them and supporting them as they're introducing great music to young people. So I thought it was just kind of a nice example of kind of how we're using some of those values and value systems in some of the work that we're doing. Yeah, I wanted to ask if there were questions about that, programs. And I'm also curious if any of you are involved in programming. I'm sure you are to various degrees, and things that you're seeing as you're trying to, be creative in the ways that you're presenting things and the way that you're constructing some of these programs. Something that we all kind of deal with on different levels. Paula?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the program that you were creating or you created for young people. I think that's one thing. Like we have a youth flute day as part of the convention, and that's something that we struggle, I think, a little bit with, and thinking about how to make that relevant and how to engage in that work.
That's a great question. It's nice to see you, Paula.
Yeah, I finally get to meet you.
We finally meet. It feels real now.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, and I wonder if any of you feel the same way. When I was in conservatory, I had a very narrow view about what success was going to look like for myself, right? And it's embarrassing to even admit that, but it's true. I really thought concert track, teach at university, these sorts of things were prioritized. And so I thought that was what the track was supposed to be. But through the work that we're doing at CMA and through the different communities that we're meeting, I'm realizing that we have a greater responsibility here as musicians, as artists, as advocates for the art. I mean, during the pandemic, we weren't deemed essential, right? Musicians were not, and so many musicians weren't working. And it was heartbreaking to see so many colleagues and friends, in that position. And it made me really think about what does it mean to be essential to a community? And can artists and musicians become essential, even if we're not defined in that way by a governing body? Like, can we feel like we're an essential part of the community? I think some of us already do feel that way. But it made me think about the work that we could be doing with young people and the work that we could be doing in communities to be essential, to be an essential part of their learning, of their interactions, of their engagement. Do they take those learnings into other places, back home, into their friend groups? Has it affected them? And again, it's this program that we're piloting at Casita Maria that I think really accomplishes those goals. And it was constructed by, again, an education consultancy firm called Sounds That Carry. Happy to share their contact information. They're incredible. But they've done all this research. They're both Juilliard trained musicians, but they also have masters in other things, in music therapy and curriculum development from Harvard. And so their approach is very different, and they're thinking a lot about how to activate different communities and how to make people feel like they are musicians. Like everyone is a musician. We just need to figure out, what the medium is or how we want to be expressive. And I will say there was a community engagement project that I walked by, I heard, and it was a gentleman playing the guitar, and he was just asking the kids to mimic him. So there's no reading of scores, and he was just playing a tune and asking the kids to repeat. And the kids looked a little bit bored, a little bit disengaged. and it felt I think it felt a little bit abstract for them. And I thought to myself, as musicians, like we're not really taught how to do this effectively. Some of us are so talented and it comes naturally. Some of us have had incredible teachers and we can kind of mirror those experiences to craft an experience that's great for students. But really the amount of time and energy that's put into playing the instrument really well, barely, I don't even think a fraction of that is put into how do we connect with different age groups, what are things that they're considering, how, any of these things. And so I don't pretend to be any kind of expert here. I lean on the experts. I bring these consultants in. I say, this is kind of what our goal is. Do you think it's possible? What does a curriculum look like that could include things that align with our values? And do you feel like these kids, are capable of doing, what we're dreaming? And the answer is always yes. There's so much optimism around it. So I would just say in general, we go to experts when we don't have the right skill set to do it. But we've learned a lot from it. And it's also inspiring us. I mean, this is the first program that CMA has done that's like this, where we're in the community doing this kind of work. And we see it as a continuous cycle that we can train grantees and members of our community that are already existing and give them new skills so that they can go into their own communities and do this work. And I think that that's almost in some ways more valuable than maybe getting them a concert or maybe getting them to play at our conference, but giving them actual skills, giving them experience, paying them for their work and their time, and then asking them to kind of deploy those skills in their own communities. I think that's it's a different way of thinking about serving the field. And it's something that we're really excited about and that we're trying. So as we learn, maybe we can learn together, right? And share some of those ideas.
That's great. Thank you.
Hi.
Is that me that you're looking at?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that
Thank
wasn't
you.
helpful.
I can't for some reason see me on the screen. I see all of you, so I didn't know how to raise my hand. This is going to be just a few comments, and I think it might generate an observation for you that you might want to comment on versus a specific question. So we're the Greater Portland Flute Society, and I would say, we certainly try to have we try to have a diverse board. There's gender diversity, there's amateur, professional diversity, that kind of thing. We have long been, like probably many other flute clubs on this call, very much a membership organization. So it's that membership flute community, which is good. We want to keep being that, but recently we have tried to be in the community of arts organizations and to really try to get to know them and be willing to promote things that are particularly flute centric. Like if Chamber Music Northwest has Imani Winds coming, we want to talk about Brandon, Patrick, George, and make sure people know that kind of thing. I don't know. I just feel like we're just getting the hang of that. And it's important. We want to be better at that, being a part of the community and not an isolated community of membership, which seems like a good step.
It's an excellent step.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, Barbara, like, because what you're doing with every step that you take forward, which may feel small in that moment, I mean, you are building trust, you're building action,
Indeed.
you're demonstrating through action that this is a priority. And people have different styles, right? Some people want it to be really bold and they want to announce it and say it's this and name it in a certain way. Other people want kind of the action to just speak for itself. They know they're doing the work. And I think that there's so many different ways of approaching it. And I think that that's something I'm actively learning too. I listen to Vanessa Rose, I listen to Loki's, their talks, and they're both so intelligent and have great perspectives, and they have different approaches. And I think that's something that's really fun, is to learn as you go through that journey. But I'm curious, Barbara, if there are other things that you're doing, like small steps along the way that you've seen, some nice responses and outcomes from.
Yeah, I think being, in addition to offering to promote events, people are therefore also more willing to promote ours, which I honestly didn't expect. I didn't think of that reverse. I feel like maybe I know that another small action has been to develop our own set of just sort of networking contacts where we can say, just wanted to remind you in case you could share, with your your faculty or your students or your studio that this is coming up, just sort of more of a personal contact that this is available.
I think about what Susan did. I'm sorry, Susan. I know you're on the call. You're not being shown. But Susan on my team did so much of this personal outreach. I mean, she said, I'm committed to this, and we are committed as an organization to this, and here's how I'm going to do it. And I mean, to go to 400 websites and send messages to these, I mean, it is an unbelievable,
time consuming and important.
and then we saw the response, and again it shifted, and it gave us the opportunity to pivot away from this is transactional and grant making into hey, you can be part of our community.
Yeah, true. Yes. Yeah. Very good. Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
But I'm just thinking about your story and what you're doing at the community level, and it's so valuable. And something I'm noticing too, I think post-pandemic, I feel like music organizations, music heads, I feel like everyone is just a little nicer. I don't know if all of you feel that way. Like there's this openness to want to work together that I think there were always people before the pandemic that were interested in collaborating and doing that. But I would just say there's a different openness that I feel like exists now. And I think it's because of what we all experienced. I think that post-pandemic, we're seeing all the things with audience retention and changes in buying habits, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And I think that arts organizations are saying, this is scary. I wonder how this person's feeling. Yeah, we're scared too. Hey, this is something that we're both feeling. Are there things we can do to support one another? Because, forget the competition side of things, like we need to survive and we want to do it together. And I think that maybe is something you're experiencing now with the sharing of resources and sharing a network of different events and such.
Yeah, I think so. I've heard those comments that the even community engagement feels very different post-pandemic for arts organizations.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. It's nice to have this topic. Appreciate it.
Michael, I see you unmuted.
Oh, I guess I didn't have a question. I'm sorry.
No problem. Jenny, do you want to have a conversation? Do you want to continue?
Me?
Do you have any questions?
Sure, absolutely. I wonder if you can speak a little bit about just the expansion of genres within CMA and just the importance of considering multiple genres and not being entirely classical focused all the time.
Sure. I went to a really great concert last night, the Ying Quartet and the Hershkovsky Trio, Music Mondays in New York City. And it was a great crowd. It was a free concert on a Monday night, and it was a great program. And then I was in the subway going home, and I heard an ensemble playing in the subway, and it was definitely not classical music. But I was just thinking to myself, people love making music together, right? And when I think about chamber music and I think about what that means broadly, I feel like classical music is actually a really small segment within the greater sense of just people playing music together in small groups. I mean, I think like if you consider the world, sure, classical music is played all over the world, but so are all these other traditions, in small ensemble formats, passing traditions along, the oral tradition, these things through music. It's so part of culture and history, and classical music is part of that. But I don't think that it just defines it, right? I think that it is part of it. And that's what's so great about making music, is that people can enjoy and love the joy of making music without thinking, oh, is it this, is it that? They're just making music. And a lot of the world makes music in that way. So I think that really aligns with our vision for what chamber music is, which is just music making in small groups. That's really how we view it. We support jazz artists and world music and every kind of small ensemble that wants to be part of our family. We invite them. We ask them to be part of our family and part of our community, and we always learn from them. We have a few board members that play in small ensembles that are not traditional, And I've learned so much from these individuals, hearing about their practices, hearing about the same things that they deal with in an ensemble rehearsal like that we do. Again, we're more similar than we are different. But it's also just, I think, an invitation. And again, that invitation is so critical here, that we want to embrace music making and expression in all of its forms. I think it's just the right thing to do. It's the human thing to do. It's what connects us. So I'm really proud that CMA, kind of took this bold step forward a long time ago to include other forms, within chamber music, within that definition. And I know it wasn't easy. A lot of people had a hard time with that. But I think that most people have kind of gotten over it, even if they were a little bit upset at that time, and I think that they've kind of accepted it. But I really hope that ensembles see themselves as playing chamber music despite the repertoire, the composer, or whatever tradition they represent. I think it's really important.
I just my background with CMA, I was actually one of the people that was brought on by Margaret Loy, and then I was fortunate enough to also have served on the board with Kevin. And I remember Margaret said that at the point that they'd made the decision that they needed to open up the genres in Chamber Music America, that there was this huge, almost like a membership protest, and people were really attached to sort of the tradition and what the identity of CMA had been before. And of course, now we see the immense benefit of having opened it up. And it's not only a genre thing, but it's also administrators and presenters and funders and, just this incredible sort of microcosm of the music field that's all represented within the CMA membership, which is really incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I know that there was a lot of pushback at the time. And I had a conversation with someone recently who said, chamber music is this, full stop. They described it to me in that way. And they're entitled to that interpretation of it, but I'm just glad that we're not, that we consider all forms, because again, like I think about in high school playing all these different forms of music and learning so many things from people that were playing this kind of music and what it meant to me as an artist, what it meant to me as a consumer of art, also going to concerts, going to shows, buying records. It just felt healthier, when you're exposed and accepting of everything, of all these traditions. Barbara?
What are your suggestions for making things accessible just through affordability? We do have to pay, for what we do somehow. And there's a delicate balance of that I'm sure everyone's aware of. But how do you go about offering free tickets and this affordability?
Yeah, affordability. So it's tough. It's something we're talking a lot about now in our membership structure. We've heard a lot of feedback that people can't afford, the prices that we ask for. And so, we have mechanisms in place where kind of pay what you can, people have to request it. But at the same time, that's difficult too. We want to respect people's dignity. That's hard to do. And so I'll just say, I don't have an answer for that, but I will say that we're actively thinking about what does membership mean? How can it transform? Should we change the model? These are things that we're actively talking about because we want to make sure that accessibility is a thing, and that is absolutely honored. And it's hard to do that. I will say it became really difficult during the pandemic when everyone kind of made everything free, concerts free, it's hard to go back from that because people are so used to getting it for free. It's like, oh, I have to pay for this now, even if they value it.
Yeah.
And now people, myself included, I'm very selective about what I leave the house for.
Yes,
People it's very comfortable being at home. And so it's a different kind of value proposition that we have to design, as administrators, as artists, as teachers, to entice and to convince people that it is worth coming out for. And again, I think that some of the conversations around education and creative engagement are ways to show people that music is for them, right? That music making can be part of who they are, even if they don't think of themselves explicitly as a musician. And I think that that's really, again, empowering and important. I think all of us are inherently musical. I think we have the ability to be. And if you're thinking along those lines, if that's your mindset, I think we would treat education models outreach structures and that kind of work, we would treat it differently if we believed that. And so that's something we're trying to do on kind of a small scale at CMA, but really in an effort to cultivate and bolster the next generation of audiences, of music makers, of people that really love the art form.
Yeah, all we could think of other than offering free tickets here and there was we did reach out to Title I schools. Do you know that?
Yes.
That seemed, band directors and said, for all of your flute students, the concert is free with a couple parents, but I don't know beyond the value proposition beyond that. Like you said, getting people at the door is still harder, but that seemed like a smart thing to do. And it seemed like it would have resulted in something, but that community outreach is super tricky.
I want to just share something with you, Barbara, and with everyone here about a program that I created at the Music Academy in Santa Barbara. I was there for 2 years working at the administration, and one of the programs they received funding for was a choral program, and they wanted it to be an after-school program, and they wanted to engage with Title I schools and students, in the various elementary schools throughout Santa Barbara. And I don't know about all of you, when I think of Santa Barbara, I don't think of Title I schools. I think of immense wealth and the beach and all these things, but it's incredible the divide that is present there, and how so many kids in these schools do not have access to any of the same things that I had access to. And so we were designing, it was one thing to design the artistic side of a choral program, but we are asking ourselves, like, how do we create a model around this? Because things that we didn't realize were that, households didn't have a connection to the internet or email, that like this family doesn't have a car, they take the bus. And so we took certain things for granted. And it was a huge learning curve for all of us at the academy, because we made certain assumptions. Okay, why don't we have the rehearsals at the academy? They'll love singing in Han Hall. It's beautiful. And we didn't even think of the enormous challenges that these families face. And so we actually sat down and had these focus groups and just listened. And as we were listening, we realized our approach was totally wrong. And so we reconstructed the model. We created magnet schools throughout Santa Barbara County. And what we would do is, we had volunteers walking kids from these various schools to the magnets. We had food for them. We had like snacks and lunches, and we had time for homework. I mean, we built in things that we knew the schools weren't able to do. And it became this whole curriculum. And by the time I left the academy, we had 400 kids from over 25 elementary schools in Santa Barbara participating in this program. And the music they were singing, we were thinking, okay, from a structural level, this is how we can create access points. But artistically, why don't we get them to sing as many languages as possible? Why don't we get them to explore culture through music? And so they were singing 8 different languages, everything memorized. These are elementary school kids. It was just so incredible. And I think a really moving moment was they ended, the concert with a folk song in Spanish, and so many parents there knew every word and probably never thought they'd see their kid standing on stage singing the song back to them with a chorus of people from, hundreds of kids from dozens of schools. That was a really special moment. But I think that, to your point, I think we made some really poor assumptions about what it means to execute a program like that. And we learned really quickly what it meant to be equitable, accessible. And we kind of learned the hard way. But I think that was a good lesson for all of us.
Yeah, that does explain the nobody turning in those coupons.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I wonder about, and that's the kind of thing where you can ask teachers and parents, like, what can we do to bring this to you? Like, we don't want to create an additional burden. Things that we heard in these focus groups were parents are like, I work multiple jobs. Like, I can't, some of these kids eat all 3 meals at school, and so some of these challenges started to become aware when we started asking and not assuming, and not saying like, this is what you need, but rather, what do you need? Right? It changed everything for us. But I think that built a lot of empathy, a lot of sensitivity, and a lot of like, oh, this is actually the way. And this was many, many years ago. So yeah, and the program's still in existence. So I'm really happy about that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great. you.
Barbara? Oh, I see another hand. Hi.
Oh, this might be a loaded question, but just could you share maybe some examples? I'm sure you've run across people, board members, maybe staff members, just people in your bubble that you would like to be on board with DEI things, but are not even remotely there yet, who like don't believe in it. Do you just like ignore them? How do you, maybe some examples of like how you've navigated that? And yeah, so.
It is loaded, but it's also fair. I mean, these are things that I think we've all encountered or seen, right? And it's uncomfortable. And I think the first thing is just knowing everyone is like in a different place. Everyone has different priorities and different value systems, and it's really hard, right? I mean, for me personally, I think about like how do I influence myself? Like I think about that and then others and then the whole. So I try to start from a place that I know, which is myself. And so when I'm dealing with other people that I may not know as well, don't know their journey, what kind of influences, have led them to feel certain ways. Yeah, I mean, I think about, are there creative approaches to the work that maybe I'm going to be a little bit more sensitive about in the ways that I pitch it, in the ways that I present it. And I would say that our creative engagement initiative is one of those, I think one of those things that we're using actively. Jenny's been in board meetings. I have not used the word equity, diversity. I haven't used any of those words to describe this program. The program is about the kids. It's about bringing this kind of work, to these schools and to these communities, to inform our own decision making and to support and be part of a community. And it happens to align with our values. But I don't choose to talk about it in that way necessarily, especially if there were people that were sensitive to it and didn't want to hear it in that context. But I think that there are ways to do it where we can all be sensitive to everybody's, where everybody is with the work. And it's hard not to get political. It's hard not to get offended. I understand, but I think that there are ways to do it. And again, I think for us, we focus on the positives that come, for instance, from having a really diverse board and staff. Because of that, like our decision making is more dynamic. Strategically, I think that we're more able. We have different perspectives that allow us to craft better value propositions and better pathways forward. I'm convinced of that. I know that if we had 10 of me, we would not be as successful as if we had the actual team that we have. I believe that,
I think that's been interesting for me to navigate personally, like, is that even just like the last 2 weeks, I've gotten responses of, well, why are we doing this like DEI series, for an example? Why are we doing this? Blah, blah, blah. But then also I've gotten the other end, we're not doing enough and we don't feel
Sure.
seen and we don't. So I think just like, it's interesting, I'm trying to navigate like literally both, like the both ends of the spectrum. So like you're doing a good job, but it's not enough, or you're doing too much and I don't like it. So it's tough. And then as a people pleaser, I think to me, like it's individually, it's really hard for me to navigate. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. I needed to hear that, especially today.
Yeah, no, and I wish I had a one size fits all answer. I would just say that everybody's in a different place. Everyone has different priorities and things that they want to see and values that they believe in. But I think, if you're doing the work of the organization, and following the mission of the organization, that's what can be the common denominator. That's what can kind of unite all of us. And I think that's what we do at CMA really well. I know some people, are very much advocates for this kind of work. Some are a little more neutral. But no matter what, I think that we rally around the work that we're doing. We're proud of the work that we do. And everyone feels like they're heard and has a voice. And I think that's part of the equation too. Yeah. Cool. Paula?
I'm not sure that I have a question, but I will just say that you know, what Millie is saying is kind of is important because of Millie's position in the organization. And that's our values are what we need to live, right?
Yeah.
And what you're talking about, Kevin, is we want people in our organization that have a variety of values, whether it be on their board of directors, whether it be in our staff, whether it be in our membership. We want all of those voices. And as soon as nobody has any complaints, then we actually have a problem.
Absolutely.
Because we don't have any variation of opinion. And so that's why we want all these different voices, because ultimately that's what's going to make us even more dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I
Yeah.
completely agree. Yeah.
You know, on this Zoom, you have Paula, who's the head of the DEI committee. You've got Millie, who obviously has a very important role, and you have Jennifer Clark, who's the executive director. And, you know, I am just so in awe because 10 years ago, this conversation would not have happened. And it's because of the leadership in the organization that these kinds of conversations are being given space. And of course, we have to give a ton of credit to Jennifer Grimm, who kind of kicked the door open as well. So I think it's just really important to also acknowledge the growth that's happening and the changes that are being allowed to happen. And, you know, again, to all of these discussions, earlier points, like change is hard and diversity is hard and having opposing voices is hard. But you get the richest outcomes when we have that, you know, that multifaceted component to a body of people, like no matter what the organization is. So I wonder, Kevin, if you don't mind, if we could give Jennifer just a moment to speak about her experience with the NFA.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks so much for this conversation. Yeah, I mean the way I think of it is you know, and I've said this before. I think of it as the NFA as a really big tent, and I try to make sure that everybody feels comfortable in it, and also that they can get what they're looking for when they come into the tent, whether it's to extend their skills, to meet other flutists, to sell flutists, well, whatever it is. But the NFA is pretty unique because it's so much about the members. I'm the executive director, but it's very collaborative. So I don't wake up and say one day, this is what we're going to do, because it's just not like that. The leadership is very involved, we're very collaborative, and the board is primarily right now it's elected from the members and through a nominating committee. So it's different, and but I think one of the things we talked about is that your awareness, and in the staff, and on the board, it has to be, if you're going to have a commitment to ID, it has to be in your head every minute. And every conversation I have, I think, is this recognizing our idea, strategy, and policy that's been part of our strategic plan, and it's what people overall want. And if some people don't want it, I sort of think, well, that's their choice, but focusing on what we actually do, I think, is a really great way forward. In the end, it's all about the music and supporting the community. For us, it's about the community telling us what they want and being open to hearing it and giving space for different voices. And that's what I try to make sure that we do. And with Jennifer Graham and our leadership, that's what we're trying to think of. Is like, who are the next people coming up? Who can we make space for? Who is showing some interest in being more involved? And creating more of a diverse pathways into the organization. But we also have people who've been in the organization for decades who are also very, very loyal and very, very committed. And we have to make sure that they're listened to as well. So it's all about balance.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take up any more time, but thanks for asking me.
Jennifer, it's so great to meet you and to hear from you, and to also recognize that you are responding positively to things that people want in your community. And that's what we have to do as leaders, is to do our best to represent everybody. Yeah, it's very tough. But I think that you have the right attitude about it, and I think you have the right support around you through the board, through your staff. I know I feel really supported, and it would feel very different if I didn't have a staff and a board that held me accountable, and helped me problem solve when those things come up, and weren't a sounding board for me, when I needed to talk about it, because it isn't easy, and it is a very hot topic and hot button topic, and something that people are very passionate about on either side of and so it is complicated. But I think that, like you're saying, we can prioritize the work, we can focus on the work. Everyone deserves to have music in their lives. Everyone deserves to engage with this great art form. Everyone deserves to make music with one another. Like that is something that I really believe in. And that has less to do with diversity and equity. It has more to do with just humanity and the arts and what the arts can do for us. And so I like to focus on that, and I hope that it diffuses some situations sometimes if I'm in it. Yeah, but thank you for sharing that, and congratulations on being courageous and taking those steps forward, because it takes courage. It's very hard to do that, especially when you're feeling like there may be some pushback. But again, I think progress is progress, and sometimes one step can hold enormous power. That's something that's really, I think you're doing it. So congratulations.
Great. Thank you.
Cool.
Actually, I have a question for both of you, Kevin and Jennifer. The sort of, you both talked about your boards and just the communities, but what thoughts do you both have about finding ways to nominate people to your boards or other organizations who may not be sort of like in the loop and may not be sort of in the club, and for finding ways to expand the reach outside of our prescribed networks? And I think it was Michael's point about, like, how do you get diversity of thought when you're in a group and everybody thinks the same? So what would be both of your thoughts? Or I don't know if any of you are also leaders on boards or other organizations, thoughts about, like, how do we get that door to be open to people who aren't in the inner circle?
Jennifer, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that's it's a really, really good point, and it's one that I think is so important, because we look at that in leadership, and we also look at it when we come to the convention, because we have, like, in the NFA we have like a different artistic director every year, because we have a program chair who puts the artistic components of the convention together. And I think, the first thing we say is, well, we know you're very connected and you have a great vision and you know a lot of people. Well, we don't want you to open your Rolodex. We want you to look at who everybody is who's out there. And it can be hard, because the immediate thing is, oh, I know Fred, he's fantastic at that. Well, that's great, but there's also other people who might be fantastic as well. So that's the point of always opening the door and getting a lot of voices into the room to say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that person? But in terms of our nomination process, we try to, expand the reach as much as possible to try and invite people to nominate themselves or others, and make sure that the nominating committee itself has a really broad perspective, that it itself has diversity. And that's one of the things I think is so important, is the people who are making decisions, whether it's a panel, we have the virtual event series and we have 3 people that review them. Anytime that anything is reviewed, the people who are reviewing it need to be broadly representing those different aspects. And I think that's one thing I've been very conscious of, because of my history in grant making as well, was that the people who are reviewing need to be reviewed. You can't just put those people into a room. You've got to make sure that they have really broad perspectives, and whether it's people that you're looking for to volunteer for different positions in our case, or board members, or people who are reviewing material or anything, that group has to be very carefully put together. And I think that's one thing we've been really trying hard to do.
Yeah, right, I agree with everything you said. And I would say in our grant panels, Susan, again on the call, and Jose and the entire grants team has done such an incredible job of always putting panels together that are representative of the people we're listening to. You know, diverse thinkers, diverse in every way possible. And the panels end up being really incredible to sit in, to listen to how they're processing and how they're listening. And the friendships that grow from these things are incredible, right? Because I think it's one thing to get a room full of people that all listen the same way, think the same way. And then when you get a different group, it's actually really interesting to hear what people are hearing, you know, and what kind of piques people's interest and what they hear in someone's recording. And I would say also at the board level, we have a large board, over 30 people. Something that I think is really powerful about it is that it is a national board, and a lot of our meetings are virtual. And I was thinking about Michael, I was thinking about some of these other situations with boards, and having a board where you can source people from different places is a huge advantage, because you will automatically get somebody that is not thinking the same as someone that's just maybe in your immediate community, especially if you're in a smaller community. So that's a really interesting way to widen your local effect. Even if you are kind of a local organization, it might be nice to kind of open that up and to invite people from these different places, because they'll immediately have different ways of looking at things. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about.
I think that's really important because right now, you know, all our board members are flutists. I'd say a high percentage are college professors, you know, and a few people who are administrators, or, you know, we have commercial members, and there's at least one here who are a very valuable part of our community. But we don't have a lot of different perspectives. And, you know, we're running a nonprofit, and it's rather different to being in a university. The structures, the administration, the volume of support, the budgets, the way that they operate, you know, are very different. And sometimes, you know, it can be challenging if you have a lot of people from one environment. That can be challenging as well. And I think a board that has people from different backgrounds, I think is, you know, professions and professional backgrounds, I think would add a lot to what we, the way that we operate it in our board.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, we're living in such a remarkable time, because I think all of these questions of accessibility are on the table. And, you know, I think CMA hosted a great conference with funders and performers, and we really delved into the question of like what makes a source of funding accessible, and where are the points of entry, and how do the less likely organizations have access to them. And, you know, for example, here in the Chicago area, the Illinois Arts Council is a major funder for artists, and they just completely revamped the way they approach everything. And I was meeting with Joshua Davis Ruperto, who's the head of the Illinois Arts Council, and he literally went to like 25 site visits just all around the state, just to talk to artists outside of what's sort of the normal funded artist. And it made them reevaluate how people have access to their funding. So I think this is a really exciting time in some ways, and it's really turning the paradigm on its head, which is, I think, in some ways very needed in this time. So anyway, just thought I would toss that question, because I know it's something, Jennifer and Kevin, that you guys both think about all the time. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jennifer, I love that idea about expanding what it is to be a board member of the NFA, right? It means people in the trade, people on the business side, organizations that align, you know, with the NFA. It'd be interesting to bring those perspectives in, and maybe find ways to collaborate and partner with other organizations and open up a new avenue for collaboration for your members, right? To have access to these different things. Yeah, our board is very diverse. We have presenters and managers and practicing artists and educators, and we're constantly thinking about how can we diversify even more, because I think with each new person, each new genre, each new anything, we learn so much, you know, from one another. It's really inspiring. But that's the kind of space, it feels like a playground for us. It's kind of what we try to get it to be that space. It's really fun.
Right, that sounds wonderful. Yeah.
Great.
I think when you have a board that's more operating like that, it becomes more of a creative sounding board as well. So you're not really just thinking, what are the business things that we have to go through to keep things on the same track? And I think because we have a lot of rotation in our leadership, it's sort of built in. So we have a new board chair every 2 years and a new vice president and everything. So I think in a way we get into a pattern of maintaining our protocols. And I think you know, a more diverse board in the sense of people coming from different directions can possibly take what we're doing into a direction of, well, how do we actually push how do we push it forward? Where do we actually want to go? And I think the strategic planning process is really important in that, because that's the opportunity to say, well, what comes next? Because and that involves people beyond the board, and I think bringing people into that process is really helpful, because sometimes the board, it can just be, well, you know, what are we doing with this competition, or what are we doing with this, or you know, and it doesn't really look at the bigger picture of where do we want this organization to go, who do we want to be part of it, and how can we develop and engage more, create more of the partnerships that you're talking about.
Paula?
Yeah, I do. I kind of have a question. It's a little buried here. I was thinking about how I actually serve on a board for a piano organization. I know nothing about the piano. But, you know, it's like I bring a skill set. I know about grants. I bring that skill set, right, to that organization. And it makes me kind of curious about, in your organization, what pushback you've experienced about diversifying the board, or what pushbacks have you experienced in your organization? And I will say, I mean, it just so happened that all of you were involved in the American Composers Forum, and I didn't know that when we contacted all of you. It just so happened. And that's what we're hoping to build, is sort of this coalition in some ways, because there are organizations that are already doing this and are maybe a little bit ahead of us. And maybe there are things that we can kind of know about the future, and things we can consider now as we're, you know, trying to spread our wings a little bit and try to, you know, venture beyond what we know.
Yeah, I mean, around the idea of pushback, I mean, I would say I haven't really experienced it, luckily, at CMA. I think that the pushback, yeah, it hasn't been kind of characterized in that way, luckily. And I think that there are some people that are much more focused on this work and some that are less experienced with it. And I would say with the ones that are a little less comfortable, there's a willingness to learn. There's a willingness to learn from one another. They ask great questions, you know, and I think that there's just this sense of curiosity that exists that makes the board really special. It makes it feel like a place where anything is possible, and it can be that playground, like the ideation place. So I would just say, from that standpoint, you know, we're very lucky, I think. But it takes time to build that, and I think that it means that when you are looking at board members, you are very clear about your expectations. You're very clear in articulating what it means to be a good board member, what it means to serve, what it means to be an advocate for NFA or for whatever organization, and what some of those expectations are. And I think that clarity helps a lot. And it will allow certain people to opt in or opt out depending on their comfort level when it comes to some of those values. I think that's really important to be upfront. Yeah, and we try our best to do that. And I think when you visit our website and you see, you know, our landing page, our staff and our board, you know immediately that it's a value. And so anytime I'm contacting potential board members, they've already done their research. They know that it is a focal point, something that we care about. And they're pretty open about whether or not it aligns with their own values. And sometimes it aligns in a really strong way. And sometimes it's more about the work and they want to focus on the work. And so they put themselves in certain committees that are focused on very specific things. But yeah, I think we've been really lucky to not have that kind of pushback.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, everyone, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. Are there any, final thoughts or questions or things that you want to share?
I'd like to thank you, Kevin, for spending your time with us today. It's been a really, really, really interesting conversation, and to Jenny and Paula, who've really spearheaded this series. And I think it's brought up a lot of very interesting topics, and it's going to give us a lot to talk about. And I think having a series like this, which invites input from other organizations, is so valuable to all of us at the NFA and beyond, because I think you can just get very focused on what we're doing, how we do it, how we survive. So to be able to look in a broader way is so very valuable, and having issues of diversity and everything else as the key to that, I think is incredibly valuable.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on this series. It's amazing that you have this as a resource, that you get to hear from people from the field in other parts, doing different things, and how that work is being injected into programs, into value systems and such. Thank you so much. Yeah, Paula, congratulations on spearheading this, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us this evening. This has been recorded, as the other two events from January and February were also recorded. I believe they're on our YouTube. Or if not, they will be. So if you want to share this with your friends, or if you had friends maybe that couldn't make it tonight, it will be up on our YouTube channel. Thank you again. Round of applause for everybody. We hope to join us for our normal Fluid virtual event series that we're happening every Sunday through I think April. So, and we also have virtual events through the fall too. So yep, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us, but thank you all for joining us this evening.